Hello everyone. Today we'll be looking at implementing GraphQL in Angular applications, both modular and standalone. Angular is a modern open source TypeScript framework for building modern front-end user interfaces. It was created at Google and it is currently at version 17, while GraphQL is a data query and manipulation language created at Facebook, whereby you can specify the data that you need from an endpoint, and it has only one endpoint, that is your custom URL /GraphQL. Unlike REST APIs, CRUD operations are divided into two: queries for performing GET requests and mutation for performing POST, patch, and delete requests. Now, there are two ways to write Angular, that is a modular and a standalone way. A modular way is whereby the workflow is centered around ng modules, while standalone is where components contain all the capabilities of an ng module. And without further ado, let's skip to the code. First, begin by installing Node.js and Angular, then create a new Angular application the normal way. ng new demo GraphQL modular. Yes, I'd like routing. We give it a few minutes. I'll use my superpowers to skip to the end. In the meantime, I'd like to show you one of the projects I've been working on. It is a GraphQL endpoint served through Node.js. This contains all geographical data of the counties, constituencies, and wards in Kenya. We shall take a look at a simple query. And queries are denoted by the keyword query. Then, in our document explorer, I have specified the custom methods that you can use to get the data. So, to get all counties, we use the get all countries. So, we come and put it here, get all countries. Then we return, there are two things, the ID and the name. Those are the current fields that you can, and the county, sorry, those are the two fields that you can return for now. Then voila, you can do the same for all constituencies. You can get all constituencies and constituency, and you can also return also its parent county. Perfect. In order for you to get a single constituency in a county, this is how you do. First, we're going to delete everything. Then we go to the query. This query takes a variable, and that is a constituency and its type. Then its custom method. Then this will also take an argument, that is the constituency, and the variable that we passed up here. Then this will return the constituency and its parent county. Then here below, we add our query variable, that is Msambweni, for example. Then we hit enter. So we are able to query a specific constituency from the data set that we have. Moving on to our code. We open this in VS Code. And the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to install the Apollo Angular library. This is a library that facilitates all the requests to the GraphQL server and back. So we go and open our terminal. The first thing that we are going to do is install the Apollo Angular library. ng add Apollo Angular. If you notice, in the modular Angular approach, we have used ng add. It will change a significant bit while we venture into the standalone application. You hit enter and follow the prompts. Yes. Yes, next we are going to add our URL endpoint. We are going to add this as a placeholder for now. Then hit enter. Then this command will create a GraphQL module.ts file, which will contain all our GraphQL configurations that enable us to perform these queries and mutations. Next, the next thing you are going to do, we are going to create a separate file where we are going to host all our GraphQL queries. And we are going to name it as GraphQL operations.ts. Here, we are going to start by importing GQL, then creating our queries. Remember, in the previous example that I've shown you on my personal project, everything must start with query if it's a query and a mutation if it's a mutation. So we are going to create a constant get countries because we are getting countries. Then we are going to query countries. Then we are going to return only the name. Remember to export our get countries query. Also, a point to note is you can include all other queries and mutation in this single file, or separate them, or even include them in the component.ts file. That depends with you. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to create the UI. The first thing we are going to do here is add a constructor and add Apollo. Then implement on init. Then create our custom method. We don't need this for now. Create our get countries method for performing the fetch request. So it will be like Apollo dot, we are going to watch this query, and this is going to take the query. Then we are going to subscribe to its value changes, and it will return two things, the data and an error, which will be any for now. Then to check if we are hitting our endpoint, we are going to log back the data. And the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to add the URL, our endpoint, to our GraphQL module.ts file, where we first started by adding our placeholder of example.com. This is also the same URL we'll be using for our standalone application. Then we are going to serve our application. Yes, we delete this, save that, fixes everything. Then we go to localhost 4200. Then we right click, inspect element, then go into our console log. Yes, we need to implement the get countries. Check if our application is running, and voila, we can see the list of 250 countries. Next, we are going to implement the UI, and we're going to start by implementing a section and declaring a few things in our component.ts file. That is a loading state, which is a boolean, and it's true. Then our empty array, then we are going to remove this console log, set the loading state to false, and populate our empty array with the data. So it will be countries, data dot countries. After saving that, we are going to go back to our HTML, check if the loading state is true. If it's true, we are going to show the user this message. If it's not true, we are going to populate it with the countries, and we are going to loop through. We're going to loop through the countries like so. Then add the name in the paragraph tag. Save that, and in our browser, we can see that everything is perfect. You can see the loading message for a split second, then the countries populate by themselves. And with that, we have successfully implemented GraphQL in a modular application. While we go on, I'll be creating a new GraphQL application, whereby we are going to modify it a little bit, then modify it, then implement GraphQL. Yes, I'd like to add routing. Yes, we give it a few minutes for it to create, and we are done. We are going to open our application in Visual Studio Code. So, code, perfect. Then we are going to launch our terminal. Here, we are going to do a little housekeeping, and that housekeeping is converting our application into converting our modular application into a standalone application. And by that, we start by deleting the app module.ts. Remember, in a standalone Angular application, there mustn't be any module. So next, we are going to bootstrap our application. This will take app component for now. Next, what we are going to do is go into our app component.ts file, and in the component section, we're going to add this to give it a directive that this is now a standalone component. Also, we are going to do a few things. We are going to add a few imports. That is the common module that was previously in the ng module, a router outlet, router link. Then we are going to go into the app component.html, then add the router outlet here and remove that. Next, what we are going to do is generate a component. And how we generate a component in Angular standalone is ng generate component view, then hyphen hyphen stand alone. We have to tell Angular that this is a standalone component. Perfect. This has created a standalone component, and we are also going to import it here. So it is the view component. Next, we are going to lazy load this component in our routes. We first begin by deleting everything, then importing routes. Then we are going to start registering these routes. Add the path, that is view. Next, we are going to load this component like so. Then import it. Then view component. We have successfully registered this component in our routes. Then we are going to export these routes so that we can access it in the main.ts file. Save that, then go into the main.ts file. This we are going to make a few modifications like so. Number one is we're going to add a provider. And in the provider, we are going to provide the router. Then this will take our routes. This will take our routes. So we have successfully registered the routes. We're going to test this application and serve it like so. Perfectly running. Open our browser. It is running, then add the view. So the view component works. Next, we are going to install the Apollo library. And this we are going to do with this command npm install Apollo Angular. Once this is done, we are going to create two files, the configuration file that houses our endpoint and the operations file that houses our queries. So we go to GraphQL, config.ts. Then we are going to export my endpoint and append this endpoint. And that is done. Next, we are going to create our configure operations file. So GraphQL. Remember, the naming of these files can be whatever it is that you want. For the sake of this talk, I've decided to give these distinct names. So we are going to again import GQL, then our query, fetch our countries, and return only the name. Remember to export. And that is done. Now we are going to go into our view component and test out this endpoint. So we are going to also implement on init, implement this, remove that, add a constructor, Then create our get countries method. Apollo, going to watch this query, pass in the query and the get countries. Watch this, subscribe to this on the value change, return the data and the error. Then we are going to console log the data. Then add it here so that it gets called on the component loading state. Yes, after all this is done, we are going to add the Apollo configuration in our main.ts file, and this will form all the bulk of our complexity in this application. We're going to start by making a few imports. That is, number one, the HTTP client module. And this is from Angular Common HTTP. Next, we are going to get our custom URL, my endpoint. Next, we're going to get our HTTP link. I shall explain all this after we are done. And this will be from Apollo Angular HTTP. Next, we're going to get Apollo and its options. And then we are going to get Apollo client options, Apollo link, and an in-memory caching. From Apollo from Apollo client core. And once we are done with that, we are going to start implementing. After the route, before the route, we are going to import providers from, and we are going to pass our HTTP client module. Next, we are going to provide Apollo options. After providing Apollo options, use factory, pass in our HTTP link, which is HTTP link, then Apollo client options, that is unknown. We're going to, this is where we are passing our link, Apollo link from our HTTP link that will create our URI, then pass my endpoint there, or your endpoint. Have a cache, that is a new in-memory cache. HTTP link, then finally we're going to have our Apollo here. And with that, I'm going to explain a few things. Apollo options provide options to the Apollo client, while the in-memory cache provides us a store to store our data. Through HTTP link, we are able to connect to a GraphQL server, while the HTTP client modules allows us to perform HTTP requests, and my endpoint is our custom URL or your custom URL that we created in the config. So we are going to run our application, go to the view, and we have successfully hit our endpoint and returned the list of 250, the array of 250 countries. Next, what we are going to do is populate our HTML by doing what we did the last time in the other application. Going to add a section, and before that, add a few things here. Our loading state, and our countries. For now, we're going to use any for now. Set our loading state to false, and populate our countries with the data from the endpoint. Remove the console log, go to our HTML, check if our loading state is true or false. Set the loading message, display the countries, in an ng template, loop through the data, and finally display the name of the country in a paragraph tag. And with that, save, and we are done. You can see that our countries are loading, and that is how you implement GraphQL in a modular and a standalone Angular application. And with that, I say thank you.